The sound of the engine sputtering to a halt sent a jolt through Claire's chest. The car lurched to a stop on the desolate stretch of country road, and for a moment, all that could be heard was the soft hum of the engine winding down and the distant call of birds. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty road. Claire sighed, gripping the steering wheel, frustration flooding her senses. She had been driving for hours, stuck in the endless open fields and narrow roads of the countryside. The city life seemed like a distant memory now, but what was supposed to be a quiet retreat had turned into a nightmare. The last thing she needed was to be stuck on a road that looked as though it had been abandoned for decades, with no cell service and no sign of civilization for miles. Her car had just given up on her, refusing to start no matter how many times she turned the key. Claire opened the door, the heat from the car hitting her as she stepped out. She looked around, her heart pounding. It was starting to get late, and she had no idea how long it would take to get someone to help. Her eyes darted across the landscape, hoping to see something, a house, a farm, anything. But there was nothing for miles except fields stretching out in every direction. Then she spotted it, a small barn in the distance, barely visible through the tall grass. She felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone there could help her. She started walking towards the barn, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a farm? Would the owner be kind enough to help a stranger stranded on the side of the road? She quickened her pace, her feet kicking up dust as she made her way toward the barn. The sky had begun to turn an ominous shade of gray, and the weight of the silence pressed in on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The place felt off like an old forgotten world stuck in time. She hesitated for a moment before pushing open the weathered door of the barn. Inside, the barn was dark, musty, and filled with the smell of hay and old wood. The faint sound of rustling echoed around her as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. Claire stepped further into the barn, trying to shake the unease that had settled in her chest. She had expected to find a farmer or someone working, but the place seemed deserted. Yet, the barn looked well-kept, too well-kept for a place that seemed so remote. Her eyes scanned the interior, but there was no sign of life. She stepped back toward the entrance, ready to turn around and look for another option when a voice echoed from the far corner of the barn. Well, what have we got here?" Claire froze, her heart racing. She turned toward the voice, spotting a tall, broad-shouldered man standing near a stack of hay bales, his arms crossed over his chest. He was dressed in a worn plaid shirt and faded jeans, his boots covered in dust from working in the fields. I'm sorry to bother you," Claire stammered, trying to mask the nervousness creeping into her voice. "My car broke down on the road outside. I was hoping you might be able to help me." The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, his eyes narrowing as he examined her. There was something about his gaze that made her feel uneasy. It wasn't exactly hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. "You've got guts, walking into a stranger's barn like this," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Most people wouldn't come this far." I didn't have much of a choice," Claire said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm just looking for help. My car won't start, and I can't get a signal to call anyone." The man seemed to soften a little, but the tension in his stance didn't completely dissipate. "You're lucky you found me. The nearest town's an hour's drive in the other direction. Looks like your car's a goner, then." Claire nodded, relief and anxiety warring in her chest. "I don't know what to do. I don't even know where I am. It's just me out here, and I don't want to be stranded here alone." The man studied her for a moment longer, and for a second, Claire could have sworn she saw something flicker in his eyes, something unreadable, dangerous even. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. "All right," he said, nodding toward the far side of the barn. "I've got a phone in the house. Come on, let's get you sorted out." Claire followed the man out of the barn, her footsteps hesitant. There was something about this whole situation that didn't sit right with her, but she pushed it aside. He was offering to help, and she was grateful for that. As they made their way to the farmhouse, Claire couldn't help but notice the way the man moved. Quietly, confidently, like someone used to being alone. Someone who wasn't afraid of being left in the middle of nowhere. The farmhouse was old, but it was well maintained. The garden was neat, the windows were clean, and there was a sense of care that couldn't be ignored. But the silence of the place felt strange. There were no animals, no sign of any other people. Just the man, his presence dominating the landscape like he was the only one who mattered out here. "Who are you?" Claire asked before she could stop herself. "I mean, I know you're a farmer, but where are your family?" The man's eyes flicked over to her, and for a second, the tension in his jaw tightened. He opened the door to the farmhouse without answering her question, stepping aside to let her in. "Come inside. I'll get the phone," he said, his tone a little more guarded now. Claire stepped inside, cautiously looking around. The interior was rustic but cozy. There was a fire burning in the hearth, and the room was lit by the warm glow of old-fashioned lamps. It looked like the kind of home that had been built with years of hard work, a place that had seen its fair share of history. As the man turned toward the kitchen, Claire's eyes lingered on a large framed photo hanging on the wall. It showed a woman and two children, smiling, happy together. The family portrait looked old, but there was a sharp sadness in the eyes of the people in the photo. Claire didn't know why, but it sent a chill down her spine. The man returned with the phone, but as he handed it to her, he hesitated. "There's something I should tell you," he said, his voice quieter than before. "You're not the first person to end up here." Claire raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The man looked at her, his face suddenly stern. "People come out here looking for help, but not everyone leaves. Some of them don't make it." A knot twisted in Claire's stomach. What was he saying? Before she could respond, the man's expression softened, and he handed her the phone. "Just a joke," he said, his tone light now. "Don't take it seriously. Go ahead and make your call. I'll be right here." Claire tried to call for help, but the phone screen flickered. Her stomach churned. Something was wrong. She looked at the man, who was now standing a few feet away, watching her with a quiet intensity. "Something's wrong," she muttered, frustration rising. "I can't get a signal." The man smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's an old phone," he said. "Not much service out here." Claire's nerves were on edge, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, the feeling that something was very wrong began to grow. She couldn't shake the chill running down her spine. The unease she'd felt the moment she entered the barn was back, but now it was more palpable, more dangerous. Suddenly, Claire's eyes fell on a small, dusty journal on the counter beside her. It looked old, worn, and out of place. Without thinking, she reached for it. When she opened the first page, she froze. The entries were dated years ago. They described a man, someone who had helped stranded travelers, someone who had taken them in, made them comfortable, and then, without fail, they were never heard from again. The last entry was chilling. "Another one is here, just like the others. They'll never leave." Claire's blood ran cold. She looked up at the man, who was still standing there, watching her closely. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, his smile deepened. "You don't know, do you?" A chill ran through Claire as she backed away, the journal still in her hands. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind her. Claire's mind raced as she stared at the man. No, the monster, who had been hiding behind the facade of kindness. Her hands trembled as she clutched the journal in her grasp. The words, so innocently written at first, now felt like a death sentence. "Another one is here, just like the others. They'll never leave." Her breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her hard. The man took a step forward, his smile never fading. "You should have listened when I told you to go inside," he said softly, almost as if talking to a child who had misbehaved. "But it's too late now. You've seen too much." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of there, but her feet were frozen to the floor. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the quiet farmhouse. The silence that followed was suffocating. Her gaze darted around the room, searching for any means of escape, but the windows were sealed tight, and the only way out was through the man blocking her path. "Why are you doing this?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why?" The man's expression softened just a fraction, as if he was considering her question, but then his smile returned, cold, unfeeling. "It's not about what I want. It's about what has to be done." There are rules, you see, and once you've come this far, you're a part of this place now. It's just how it works. Claire's stomach twisted in fear. The journal's words, "They'll never leave," haunted her. She wasn't going to be the next one to disappear. She couldn't let herself become just another forgotten soul in this forsaken place. But how could she fight against a man who seemed to have control over everything here? How could she escape when every path led to him? You're insane. Claire spat, her fear boiling into anger. You think you could just trap people here? I won't let you. The man's gaze sharpened, and his smile twisted into something darker. You don't have a choice. The only way out is death, or becoming one of us. The words hit Claire like a punch to the gut. Becoming one of us. She knew then that the man wasn't just talking about letting her go. He was talking about turning her into something else. Something twisted, something wrong. She had seen the way he looked at her, the way he had studied her when she first entered his barn. It wasn't just curiosity. He had been sizing her up, deciding her fate. Claire felt her throat tighten. I won't be like the others. I won't stay here with you. Without thinking, she hurled the journal at him, the weight of her fear and fury making her act on pure instinct. But the man simply stepped back, his expression unchanged as the journal flew past him. He wasn't fazed by her outburst. He had long since stopped seeing people like Claire as anything more than pawns in a twisted game. Why fight it, Claire? He said softly, stepping closer to her. You've seen how it goes. You're going to stay here. You'll live here for as long as you can stand it. And when you break, I'll turn you. It's inevitable. Everyone does. Her breath was ragged now, her chest rising and falling in panic. She wanted to scream, to fight, but what could she do against someone who had the power to control this place, this nightmare? Let me go, she begged, her voice cracking with desperation. Please, I don't want to be here. Just let me leave. The man shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. It's already too late for that. You should have stayed away. But now, you're just like the others, lost in the dark. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Claire's eye. She whipped her head toward the window, her heart leaping in her chest. A car. For the briefest moment, she saw headlights in the distance, just a glimmer of hope, a lifeline. Someone else was out there. Someone else who could help her. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't wait another moment. She had to act, and she had to act fast. Without another word, Claire bolted toward the back door. She knew it was risky, but she had to try. She had seen the man's twisted obsession, and she wasn't about to let him make her another casualty in his cruel game. She yanked at the door, her hands shaking as she tried to push it open. It was stuck. No, no, no. She pulled harder, using every ounce of strength left in her. She wasn't going to let him take her without a fight. The door creaked open just enough for her to squeeze through, and she pushed her way out into the night air, gasping for breath. Her legs were shaky, but the sight of the headlights, so close now, gave her the energy to run. She sprinted toward the car, hearing footsteps behind her, loud, fast. The man was coming after her. Help! Help! Claire screamed, her voice raw with fear and desperation. The car was just a few feet away now. The headlights illuminated the gravel road, and she saw the driver, just a shadow in the driver's seat. The man behind her laughed a low, mocking sound. It's too late, Claire. They won't help you. But Claire didn't stop. She was almost there. The car door opened, and Claire hurled herself inside, slamming it shut just as the man reached her. Drive! She screamed at the driver. The man's face twisted with rage as he pounded on the window. But the driver, a stranger with a look of confusion and concern, didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas, and they sped off, leaving the farmhouse and the man behind. Claire collapsed back in the seat, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She looked back, half expecting to see the man chasing them. But there was nothing but the empty road stretching out behind them. I don't know who you are, the driver said, glancing over at her with a look of disbelief. But you were running from something serious. Are you all right? Claire looked out the window, her mind racing. She didn't know how to explain what had just happened, what she had just escaped. The fear, the terror, the darkness that had been closing in on her. It was all still fresh in her mind. But for the first time in hours, she felt safe. She was free. I don't know, she whispered, her voice shaky. But I don't think I'll ever be the same. The car sped down the road, leaving the farmhouse behind. Claire's breathing began to slow, and her body, still trembling, started to relax. She glanced over at the driver, who was looking at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "What happened back there?" he asked. "Who was that guy?" Claire swallowed hard, trying to collect herself. "I don't know his name," she said, her voice shaky. "But he's been trapping people out there. He's not just some ordinary farmer. He's something else. He's been taking people in, and they never leave. He tried to do the same to me. I think I was just another victim." The driver looked at her in disbelief, his eyes widening. "That's crazy. You're lucky you got away. People don't come back from those kinds of places. Not without something changing them." "I don't know what he wanted," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not going back there. Not ever. Not if it means becoming like the others. I won't let him do that to me." The car continued down the road, Claire's mind still spinning with everything that had happened. It felt like a nightmare, one she had barely escaped. But as she looked at the man in the driver's seat, she realized something. She had survived, and no matter what came next, she would never let herself become another lost soul in that forsaken place.
The sound of rolling suitcases echoed through Terminal 3 like a drumbeat of judgment. "Move faster, Mia," my father barked, his voice sharp enough to slice through the crowd. "You're holding us up again. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin." I bit my tongue and stepped aside as my stepsister Lila strutted past me, her designer heels clicking on the polished floor like a countdown to humiliation. She tossed her glossy blonde hair back and smirked. "Maybe she's nervous," she said, glancing at me. "It's probably her first time seeing a plane up close." My father chuckled, not even trying to hide his disdain. "She can't even afford economy, Lila. Don't expect her to know how airports work." Laughter followed. Heads turned. Heat burned through my face. But I didn't say a word. I just adjusted the strap of my old backpack and stared at the giant glass windows where planes gleamed under the morning sun. They were flying first class to New York for a family celebration, one I was technically invited to but never truly wanted to attend. Lila lifted her boarding pass with a grin. "First class boarding, Daddy. We'll have champagne before takeoff." "Enjoy that," I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be bitter. Some of us just make better life choices." That one stung. Because 2 years ago, I'd made a choice, walking away from my father's company after he married a woman only 5 years older than me and handed her daughter, Lila, everything I'd built. Now they stood there, all smiles and status, while I was the outsider with an old suitcase and a quiet face. "Do us a favor," my father said, lowering his voice. "Try not to embarrass the family name. People talk." I looked him dead in the eye.
"People always talk, Dad."
"It's what they say later that matters." Before he could reply, the loudspeaker announced boarding for their flight. They gathered their bags and headed for the gate. Lila turned, smirking over her shoulder. "See you in coach if you can afford the ticket." They laughed as they walked away. I watched them disappear into the gate tunnel, my chest tight but my expression steady. Around me, travelers rushed past, families hugging, businessmen scrolling, children crying. But then, a shadow crossed the polished floor.
Boots.
Polished black leather. A tall man in a navy uniform stopped in front of me, posture crisp, voice calm but commanding. "Miss Monroe?" My father's laughter still echoed faintly from the gate. "Yes," I said. The officer straightened. "Your jet's ready, ma'am. We'll begin pre-flight whenever you're ready." The words sliced through the noise like thunder. My father turned around mid-step. Lila froze beside him. Their faces drained of color as a dozen passengers stopped to stare. I blinked once, slowly, then smiled. Perfect timing. I was getting tired of standing. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the officer gestured toward the private terminal beyond the security barrier. A sleek black car waited near the runway. Lila's mouth fell open. Jet? Her? The officer gave a professional nod. Yes, ma'am. Miss Monroe owns it. I met my father's stunned eyes.
You were right, Dad.
I can't afford economy. I paused, then added softly, it's too small for me now. Then I turned and walked away, calm, composed, my heart pounding with every step. The glass doors opened, and sunlight spilled across the tarmac. The wind whipped my hair as the hum of engines filled the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt untouchable. The door of the luxury jet closed behind me with a soft hiss, sealing out the chaos of the airport. The scent of polished leather and espresso replaced the cheap perfume and laughter I'd just walked away from. Welcome aboard, Miss Monroe, said Officer Grant, now smiling with a kind of quiet respect that came from knowing exactly who I was. I sank into a cream-colored seat by the window as the engines rumbled alive beneath the floor. The city stretched below like a story I'd already finished reading. As the jet began to taxi, my phone buzzed, Dad flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Mia, his voice snapped, sharp as ever. What kind of joke are you playing? No joke, I replied coolly. I just stopped living by your version of success. I asked you to be practical, he snapped. Instead, you ran off chasing dreams. Dreams, I said, leaning back, built the company you're still running, Dad. The one I helped design before you replaced me with Lila. There was silence. Then, his voice dropped lower. You could have stayed, Mia. You didn't have to walk out. I stared out the window, remembering that night 2 years ago, the shouting, the betrayal, the moment he handed my project portfolio to Lila as if I'd never existed. You're right, I said softly. I didn't have to. I chose to. The line went dead. Grant stepped forward, setting a folder on the table beside me. Your itinerary, ma'am. Meeting with the investors in Manhattan at 3 p.m. Your security team will escort you from the terminal. Thank you, I said, closing the folder. He hesitated. If I may say so, it's not every day someone takes back everything they lost. I smiled faintly. It's not about taking it back. It's about becoming the person they said you'd never be. The engines roared, and the plane lifted, smooth, powerful, defiant. I watched the clouds swallow the ground, my reflection faint in the glass. 2 years ago, I'd walked out of my father's office with nothing but a laptop, a handful of contacts, and a promise to myself that I'd never beg anyone for a chance again. While Lila flaunted her new life on social media, I worked nights, coding, designing, building a startup no one believed in. When investors laughed, I kept going. When the bank refused my loan, I sold my car. When everything seemed impossible, I remembered that humiliation in my father's boardroom, his exact words, "You'll never make it without me." But I did. And now, that silly idea, he mocked, a small AI logistics company named Monrovia Systems, had become a global tech solution worth hundreds of millions. Every insult, every laugh, every door slammed in my face built the woman sitting on this jet. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ma'am, the New York media's been calling. They heard you'll be attending the Global Tech Summit this evening. Do you want to make a statement? I glanced at my phone screen again. Another message from my father. Just one word this time. How? I typed back, by being everything you thought I couldn't. Then I hit send. The jet sliced through the clouds as sunlight bathed the cabin in gold. My reflection in the glass looked older, calmer, stronger. For years, I'd let them define me as the quiet one, the forgotten daughter. But now, they'd have to learn my name again, on billboards and headlines, in every corner of the business world. And tonight, when I landed in Manhattan, the same family that laughed at me in the terminal would be at the same summit, sponsored by my company. They just didn't know it yet. I smiled as the city skyline began to rise in the distance. The real takeoff hadn't just happened in the air, it had started the day I walked away from them. The jet wheels kissed the runway with a low hum as Manhattan's skyline glimmered ahead like a challenge. I exhaled slowly, collecting myself. Tonight wasn't just a business event, it was closure. Grant walked me down the private terminal steps to a waiting black SUV. The moment the tinted door shut, my assistant, Sophie, turned from the front seat, tablet in hand. Everything's ready, ma'am. The Global Tech Summit begins in 2 hours. You'll open the event as the keynote sponsor. Perfect, I said, my tone steady, though my pulse had its own rhythm. And the guest list? She smiled knowingly. Richard Monroe and his daughter confirmed attendance this morning. Of course they did. My father never turned down an opportunity for publicity. What he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Monrovia Systems wasn't just sponsoring the summit. It owned it this year. As the SUV glided through the city streets, I caught glimpses of billboards flashing my company's logo, neon blue against midnight black. 2 years ago, I was the invisible daughter. Tonight, I was the headline. When we pulled up at the glass-covered venue, camera lights flickered like 1,000 heartbeats. Reporters crowded the entrance. I stepped out into the flashes, wearing a sleek navy dress, not designer-branded, but confident, elegant mine. A journalist shouted, "Miss Monroe, is it true Monrovia Systems bought the Global Tech Network?" I met her gaze and smiled faintly. Let's just say, I like to own the places I was once denied entry to. Inside, chandeliers glittered above the marble floors. Conversations buzzed. Suits, champagne, ego, all the same world that once laughed me out of its rooms. And then I saw them. Across the hall, my father, Richard Monroe, was deep in conversation with a group of investors. His new wife, polished as ever, stood beside him. Lila hovered nearby in a red gown, smiling for attention, her laughter echoing just like it did at the airport. They hadn't seen me yet. "Miss Monroe," an announcer called, stepping onto the stage. "Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, the CEO of Monrovia Systems." The crowd clapped. My father turned toward the stage, clapping politely until he froze. The microphone light hit my face. Recognition slammed into his expression. Lila's hand dropped from her glass. "Mia," she whispered. I smiled calmly, my heels silent against the stage as I stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. 2 years ago, I was told I'd never belong in this room. Tonight, my company sponsors it." The audience laughed lightly, impressed. But I wasn't joking. I looked directly at my father as I continued, my voice unwavering. I built Monrovia Systems from a single laptop and a coffee shop corner. No inheritance, no investors, just grit and the memory of being told I wasn't enough. Lila's face twisted, but I went on. People often ask what motivates success. For me, it was simple. Humiliation is a louder teacher than privilege. Applause rose, scattered, genuine. My father's hands stayed frozen mid-clap. After the speech, as the crowd mingled, he approached, slowly, cautiously, as though crossing enemy ground. "Mia, I didn't know you were successful." I interrupted, my tone soft but sharp. "No, you didn't. You were too busy celebrating my replacement." Lila stepped forward. "We didn't mean." "You meant every word," I said quietly. "At the airport, at the office, every time you laughed at what you thought was failure. But you forgot. Some of us rebuild in silence." My father looked at the floor. "You're still my daughter." I nodded.
Yes.
"Just not the one you raised." As the orchestra began to play, the crowd swirled around us, business partners shaking my hand, journalists asking for interviews. My father stood lost in the lights, realizing the hierarchy had shifted. Tonight, I didn't just win. I rewrote the story, and they were forced to watch it happen. The night had thinned to a soft hum of music and murmurs. Investors toasted. Journalists scribbled. But at the heart of the grand ballroom, Richard Monroe stood frozen, watching the daughter he once dismissed now command every spotlight in sight. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their silence was enough. Sophie approached me with a glass of sparkling water. "Ma'am, the media wants a closing statement before we end." I took the glass, my eyes still on my father across the room. Let them wait a minute. Lila stood beside him, her red lipstick faltering into a nervous line. She whispered something, but Richard didn't move. His expression had changed, less arrogance, more disbelief. Maybe even regret. When I finally walked over, conversations around us dimmed. He straightened his jacket, trying to recover old dignity. "Mia," he said quietly, "I should have known. You were always sharp. I just didn't think that I could succeed without you." I cut in, voice calm, even kind. "You made that clear." He exhaled. "I said things I regret." "No," I replied, setting my glass on the table. "You said things that built me." His eyes met mine, tired, defeated. "You could have told me. We could have worked together." I smiled faintly. "You taught me that working with you meant losing myself. I didn't walk away to punish you. I walked away to remember who I was." Lila stepped forward, forcing a shaky laugh.
Come on, Mia.
"Don't act like some hero. You got lucky with investors. That's all." I turned to her, still smiling. "Luck doesn't keep you in business for 2 years straight. And investors don't buy companies, they buy belief. Something you've never had in anyone but yourself." Her face hardened. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said. "It just makes me free." Behind me, the announcer called for closing remarks. Sophie gestured toward the stage, but I raised a hand. "1 second." I looked back at my father, my voice dropping to something softer, real. "You know what hurt most? It wasn't losing the company. It was realizing my family only valued me when I was convenient." He swallowed hard. "You're right. I failed you." For a moment, I almost believed his sincerity. Almost. But some apologies come too late to matter. So instead of bitterness, I offered something he didn't expect, grace. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I carried that weight long enough." He blinked, stunned. "Mia." I stepped back, glancing at the glowing banner above the stage, Monrovia Systems, building the future. "You were right about one thing, Dad," I said, smiling softly. "I couldn't afford economy. I was never meant to fly that low." And with that, I turned, walking back toward the stage. The spotlight hit, the cameras rolled, and applause thundered through the hall as I gave the final speech. I talked about resilience, the power of rebuilding, and how being underestimated was the best training ground for success. But as I spoke, I saw my father and Lila near the exit, watching in silence as the crowd stood for me, the daughter they'd mocked, now leading an empire. When the applause ended, I stepped off stage, heart calm. Sophie handed me my coat and whispered, "You did it." I looked back once more toward the doors. "No," I said. I just stopped letting them define what it meant. Outside, the city shimmered with 1,000 lights. My jet waited on the private strip again, engines humming softly. As I climbed aboard, Grant saluted. "Back to California, ma'am?" I smiled. "Home, wherever that really is." And as the plane rose through the clouds, I thought of that morning at the airport, the laughter, the humiliation. Now, miles above them, I finally understood. Some farewells aren't said with words. They're written in altitude. "You're just a nanny with a dream." My sister screamed it while bouncing her baby on her hip, her voice slicing through the backyard like a lawnmower blade catching a stone. The laughter came fast, my uncle choking on a swig of beer, my cousin slapping his thigh like he'd heard the joke of the century, and my mother pressing her wine glass to her lips to hide the smug smile forming underneath. And me? I stood still beside the grill, hands folded politely in front of me, pretending I hadn't just been reduced to a punchline. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. "Emily, don't take it personally," my mother said with faux sympathy, her southern twang dipping sweet like poisoned honey. "A woman your age, watching someone else's kid while dreaming of what? Writing a children's book." Her laugh was quiet but sharp. "That's adorable." My knuckles tightened around the napkins I held, the edges of the paper digging into my palms. I'd come to this family barbecue in good faith. I wore a floral sundress, kept my hair neat, brought peach cobbler from scratch, and yet it only took one sentence from Jessica to undo everything. "Dream big, sis," Jessica smirked, tipping her glass. "But maybe dream realistic next time." I heard that word again, nanny, like it was synonymous with invisible, or helpless, or less than. Never mind that I'd helped raise her child while she went on yoga retreats and spa weekends. Never mind that I worked 12-hour days for a man who trusted me more than his own family. Never mind that I'd once sold my car to keep my sister's lights on, and she never even knew. I said nothing, not because I was weak, but because I knew what was about to walk through the garden gate. The second the latch clicked behind me, I felt it. Every head turned as his polished shoes touched the patio. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked straight past the confused stares and shocked faces and stopped at my side. Nathan Hale, the man I had worked for, the man I'd kept secret, the man who now, in full view of my family, took my hand and laced his fingers with mine like we'd done it 1,000 times before. My sister's face fell. What is he doing here?" she stammered, shifting her baby to the other hip. Nathan didn't even glance at her.
He looked only at me.
"I couldn't let you face them alone," he said softly. And then he turned toward the rest of the backyard.
"Come."
Collected. Unshakable. "She's not just your nanny," he announced. "She's my wife." Silence. Even the birds seemed to hush. "She's what?" my mother breathed. Nathan pulled something from his coat, crisp, folded, and deliberate. He handed it to Jessica. "Also," he added, "this is the deed to your house. As of today, it's no longer in your name." Jessica stared down at the paper like it had turned to flame in her hands. Nathan smiled slightly. "It's in hers now." The baby started crying. But no one moved. No one laughed. "Not anymore." "You're lying," Jessica finally whispered, her voice shaky but trying to sound confident. "This is some joke, right?" She looked around for backup, but even the relatives who'd laughed the hardest earlier were suddenly silent. A few stepped back. Others looked down at their drinks. No one moved to defend her. I stayed still. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I let the silence stretch, heavy and necessary, because this family only understood power when it showed up with paperwork and a diamond ring. Nathan gently squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to explain, or would you rather?" My eyes met Jessica's. I saw panic blooming fast, panic I'd worn on my own face for years growing up under their weight. But I didn't blink. "I think I'll take it from here," I said. I stepped forward. Past the table covered in deviled eggs and sweet corn. Past my uncle who once told me no man would marry a woman who changed diapers for a living. Past my mother, who still looked like she hadn't fully inhaled since the word wife left Nathan's mouth. "You all wanted a story," I began. "Let me give you one." I turned to my sister. "Remember last year? When you and Brian defaulted on the mortgage? When you told everyone you'd figured it out? That was me. I made the call. I wrote the check. Nathan and I had just gotten married in private. You know why I didn't say anything? Because I wanted to see who you all really were when you didn't think I had anything to offer." Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came. "You mocked my job, but I raised your son when you couldn't be bothered. You laughed at my dreams, but I wrote every night after putting your baby to sleep. You said I was nothing." My voice cracked, but only for a second. "You all did." I turned toward my mother. "You said I was too soft, too emotional, a burden with fantasies. Remember that." Her lips parted, but I kept going. "Nathan saw what none of you ever did. He believed in me. Not because I was his employee, because I was a fighter. And when we fell in love, we decided to do it quietly. Build something real. Away from this circus." Nathan stepped forward again. "And now we're building a life together. This house." He nodded at the paper in Jessica's shaking hand. "Emily didn't take it out of cruelty. She bought it legally because your loan was falling apart and you were lying about it. She saved you without your knowledge. And when you bragged today like she was beneath you, we decided it was time you knew the truth. Jessica's knees gave a little. She had to lean on the patio table. Her baby started crying again, and this time, even the sound didn't pull any sympathy from anyone watching. My aunt spoke up from the back. Emily, is this true? You saved her house. I nodded. She was days away from foreclosure. And then, out of nowhere, my father spoke. Well, if you're married now to him, he paused, glaring at Nathan like he was the devil in a suit. Don't come crawling to us for anything when it ends. I turned slowly to him. Crawl? I repeated. I haven't asked you for a single thing in 10 years. You all closed that door long ago. The only difference now is I've stopped waiting for you to open it again. It was like a fire was ripping through every inch of the backyard. But no one moved. They just watched. Watched the girl they thought would always stay quiet rise and take back the story. I took a deep breath. The wind blew through my hair. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow in this family. I felt like the storm they never saw coming. Jessica hadn't sat down since the moment Nathan walked in. Her hands trembled as she tried to hush the baby now fussing in her arms. Her husband, Brian, stood off to the side like a man who just realized the ship was sinking, and fast. And my mother? She kept adjusting her bracelet, pretending this wasn't the most humiliating afternoon of her life. I should have felt satisfied. I should have soaked in their shame like sunlight. But instead, I just felt tired. Nathan noticed. He leaned closer to me and whispered, You want to leave? I'll have the car brought around. I shook my head slowly. Not yet. Because this wasn't about a dramatic exit. This was about the reckoning. I stepped toward the center of the patio where all eyes could see me. I know what you all think. That I'm the soft one. That I ran away to play nanny, while the rest of you built real lives. But let me remind you of something. Your real lives? They're built on borrowed time, bad credit, and fake smiles. A low murmur rolled through the crowd. I kept going. Jessica acts like royalty, but she couldn't pay her utility bills without someone bailing her out. Brian? He's still lying about working from home. I've seen the past due notices in their trash. Don't act like you're better than us, Jessica snapped, her voice rising again. You married rich. That's it. That's all you are now, someone's trophy wife. Nathan stepped forward again, but I held up a hand.
No.
Let me handle this. I locked eyes with her. I wasn't looking to marry anyone. I fell in love with someone who respected my work, my mind, my heart. Someone who read my first manuscript and told me it was publishable, not laughable. Do you even remember the last time you believed in something? Jessica's jaw clenched. You've always needed people to fail, so you can feel tall. But that ends today. Then I turned to the others. If anyone here ever wondered why I disappeared for holidays, or didn't call back, or never brought anyone to dinner, it wasn't because I was ashamed of my life. I paused, letting the air hang heavy. I was ashamed of this one. Complete silence. Even the kids stopped playing. And then, finally, my father stood up.
Slow.
Deliberate. He looked at me for a long time. And for once, there was no mockery in his eyes. Just discomfort. Like someone who'd been handed a mirror after decades of living in darkness. You always had a flair for the dramatic, he said at last. But I'll give you this, you were always stronger than I thought. A half admission, but still not enough. You thought I was weak because I cried, I said softly. Because I forgave. Because I kept hoping you'd show up for me the way I kept showing up for all of you. I looked around the yard. You all wanted a puppet. Someone to play the part you assigned her. But I rewrote the script. And now, I don't need your applause. I just needed you to see me, one time, clearly. Before I go. Jessica stepped forward, her face red. You're not going anywhere with my house. It's not yours anymore, I cut in. And I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to be free. I took Nathan's hand. And I've never felt lighter in my life. The car was waiting at the curb. Sleek, black, windows tinted, like the future I'd never been invited into. but built myself brick by brick behind their backs. Nathan nodded to the driver, but didn't open the door. Not yet. He stood by me, quietly protective, but with the same look he'd given me the first time he ever read my notebook cover to cover. Admiration. Respect. Love that didn't need to speak loud to be heard. Jessica wasn't finished, though. She stormed across the patio, shoved the baby into Brian's arms, and came right up to me. Her eyes were burning, but behind the anger, I could see it. Fear. The kind of fear that only surfaces when someone realizes the pedestal they stood on wasn't real. It was borrowed. "This is revenge, isn't it?" she hissed. "You've been waiting to humiliate me." I tilted my head slightly, watching her face.
No, Jessica.
"If this were revenge, you'd be living out of a motel, and I'd be watching from a window." I stepped closer. This is just truth. And truth stings more than payback ever could. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. No witty comeback. No loud defense. For the first time in my life, my sister didn't know what to say. And then my mother stepped in. Always perfectly dressed, always hosting, always playing queen bee even in her silence. But her eyes, God, her eyes were wide now. Not with shock. With something closer to recognition. "You married him," she said, almost in disbelief, as if it wasn't the deed, or the new last name, or the ring that stunned her, but the possibility that someone she dismissed had outgrown her grasp. I nodded. "And he respects me," I said. Not just as his wife, but as someone who never stopped fighting for her own worth, even when her own mother told her she had none. She winced.
Good.
"You always said dreams don't pay bills," I continued. "But mine did. I sold my book last week. It's going into production. And guess what? The dedication page doesn't mention a single one of you. That one cut. I could see it. And still, none of them said sorry. Not one of them. Because apologies require reflection. And they weren't built for that. They were built for image. Appearances. Denial." Nathan opened the car door for me. I stepped inside. But just before I sat down, I turned back. "To anyone who ever made me feel invisible," I said clearly, "this is your final look. I hope it lasts." Jessica turned away, arms crossed. My mother blinked too fast. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear. My father stood there stiff as concrete. But no one said a word. No protest. No fake hugs. Just silence. And I realized then that silence was louder than any applause. We pulled away from the curb in silence, Nathan's hand resting over mine as the car glided down the road. The backyard was behind us now. So were the sneers, the whispers, the years of being the family's afterthought. It was over. Not just the party, the chapter. And something about that made the air feel different, lighter. Like I could finally breathe without holding back the exhale. I turned to Nathan. Was I too harsh? He looked at me the way he always did, like every part of me, even the uncertain ones, deserved to be seen. "You were honest. They just weren't ready for it." I smiled faintly. "I think I've waited my whole life for today." He leaned closer. "They weren't laughing when I called you my wife." I laughed. A real one this time. The kind I never got to have at family dinners. That night, I sat by our balcony window, watching the city lights twinkle. My laptop was open, manuscript file still glowing on the screen. I wasn't writing. I didn't need to. Not tonight. Because tonight wasn't about creating. It was about becoming. I'd spent years surviving, smiling through insults, babysitting through judgment, writing in stolen hours between everyone else's chaos. And I'd done it quietly, praying someone would notice. But no one ever did. Until Nathan. He'd noticed when I stayed late just to clean spilled juice off the kitchen tile without being asked. When I jotted story ideas on post-it notes between nap schedules. When I read bedtime stories in voices animated enough to make even his tired, hardened heart soften. He didn't just see me. He chose me. And I'd chosen myself, finally, by no longer shrinking to fit the role my family shoved me into. A few days later, a package arrived at our penthouse. No return label. Just a slim envelope tucked inside with handwriting I recognized immediately. Jessica. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a photo of us as kids, me and her, barefoot in the backyard, covered in mud, laughing so hard our eyes were closed. Taped to the back was a note. I didn't know I was becoming the person who would hurt you. I'm not asking for anything. Just thank you. For saving my house. For still showing up, even when we didn't deserve it.
Jessica. I stared at it for a long time.
Not forgiveness. Not redemption. But something real. And sometimes that was more than enough. The following week, I sat in front of a packed bookstore. My first reading. My first published novel. The crowd was quiet as I closed the last page and looked up. I used to think I needed permission to matter, I told them. But you don't need a title, or a ring, or approval to be enough. You just need to remember that quiet doesn't mean powerless. A woman in the front row teared up. And as the room filled with applause, I realized they might have called me just a nanny with a dream.
But now,
I was a wife, an author, and finally my own damn story. I didn't even have time to set down my glass before the burn hit. Sharp, public, and intentional. Wow, look at everyone showing up for Lily, my sister Madison said loudly, raising her champagne. Some people are just lucky. Others, her eyes slid to me. Well, let's just say not every bride gets a crowd. A few relatives chuckled. My jaw clenched so tight I felt a tremor run through my cheek, but I kept my smile small and steady. If they thought that was going to break me, they truly had no idea who they were talking to. Because while they clinked glasses and whispered about how small and quiet my upcoming wedding would be, I had spent the last 6 months planning something they couldn't even imagine. Something that would make tonight's ballroom, packed with gold decor and overenthusiastic cousins, look like a backyard barbecue. But I didn't let that show. I just sipped my drink like her words rolled right off me. Truth was, my life had never been the one they bragged about. Madison was the golden child, daughter with a pristine job, perfect fiancé, flawless record of being the family's superstar. I was always the one they tossed little digs at. She works too much. She doesn't socialize. She'll never pull a big wedding together on her own. But they didn't know the biggest detail of all. My fiancé, Carter Hayes, was the founder of an oceanfront resort chain. He wasn't flashy and didn't flaunt it, so my family assumed he was some regular guy who probably drives an old sedan. They would learn, and I would enjoy every second of that learning process. The music shifted and Lily, the beloved, always praised cousin, floated past in her wedding gown, glowing. I smiled genuinely at her. It wasn't her fault that our family's hobby was comparing everyone like they were entries on a scoreboard. Haley, Lily said softly, pulling me aside. Ignore Madison. She's just jealous your ceremony is next week. I'm good, I told her. Really? But inside? My chest was a tight knot, not from sadness, but anticipation. Madison drifted by again, leaning into a group of ants. I mean, what's the point of sending invitations if no one's going to show up? She laughed. The knot inside me snapped. I turned slightly, my voice calm. You'd be surprised who shows up for me. She blinked, taken aback by how steady I sounded. Sure, Haley, she said mockingly. Keep dreaming. An older uncle chuckled. Don't make it too fancy, kiddo. You might overwhelm yourself. Overwhelm myself? Oh, if only they knew. But I didn't fire back. I didn't have to. Their own assumptions were going to detonate right under their feet soon enough. The night dragged the way family events do when you're the designated target. Every conversation felt like a test. Every laugh seemed a little too pointed. Every side glance at me carried this smug expectation that I would crumble. But instead, I floated through it, quiet, patient, almost serene, because I knew the clock was ticking towards something they couldn't possibly picture. Near the end of the reception, as guests prepared to leave, I stepped outside for some air. The hotel lights shimmered on the pavement, warm and golden. My phone buzzed. Carter, everything is set for tomorrow. You sure you're ready for this? A grin spread across my face.
Me.
More than ready. Carter, I'll pick you up at noon. You won't walk into that ceremony alone. My heart softened, not because of the message, but because of him. He was the only person who had never treated me as less. He didn't care that I didn't have a brag-worthy job or a massive social circle. He loved me, supported me, and gave me space to become someone stronger. Tomorrow would be our rehearsal ceremony at the coastal venue, an event small enough to not trigger any family pressure, but large enough for the staff to test everything. Everything. Including the parking staging. Including the live stream system. Including the helicopter pad. I caught my reflection in the window. My eyes weren't sad. They were focused. Laser sharp. This wasn't revenge out of spite or pettiness. This was reclaiming something they had spent years stomping on. My worth. The next afternoon arrived faster than expected. Ocean air whipped my hair as I stepped out of the SUV, the waves crashing against the rocks beside the ceremony platform. Staff members scurried around, checking lights, cables, and cameras. Ms. Brooks. A woman in a headset approached. The live stream team wants to confirm your timeline. Absolutely, I said, taking the clipboard and flipping through. This wasn't some small backyard event like they assumed. This was a full-scale, professionally filmed, internationally streamed wedding. Because when Carter proposed, he told me, if I'm marrying the woman I waited for my whole life, the world is welcome to watch. I told him it wasn't necessary. He said, it's not necessary. It's what you deserve. That single sentence rewired something inside me forever.
And now?
Now I was going to walk down a glass aisle suspended over the water, surrounded by an ocean horizon and 1,000 soft lights. The staff walked me down the platform to the spot where the aisle began. The view stretched endlessly, blue waves shimmering under the afternoon sun. You okay? One of the coordinators asked. More than okay, I said. Then I saw it, cars beginning to line up on the cliffside road. Not 5, not 10, dozens. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. A line of luxury vehicles so long it wrapped around the hill like a jeweled ribbon. The coordinator whispered, wow, they all came early. All of them, Carter's business partners, influencers who adored the resort brand, local VIPs he had helped over the years, and event sponsors who wanted to support him. And they were here for us. My throat tightened, not out of pain, but out of everything opposite. Madison had mocked me in front of everyone. But by sundown tomorrow, she'd see over 300 luxury cars filling the coastline. And when the live stream went live to 2.5 million viewers, she'd realize the thing she underestimated most.
Me.
By the time the sun dipped into the waterline, the cliffside road looked like a luxury car convention. I stood at the balcony of the venue, clutching the railing as headlights stretched into the distance, silky streaks of silver, gold, and obsidian. Carter stepped beside me, sliding his arm around my waist. Still think no one's going to show up for you? He teased softly. I let out a quiet breath that trembled a little. If Madison could see this now. Oh, she will, he said. Trust me. We hadn't sent my family the rehearsal details, only the actual wedding day schedule. But I knew how my family worked. They loved gossip. Too much. Someone would leak a picture before the night ended, and tomorrow would be chaos in the group chat. Timeline ready? Carter asked. Almost. Livestream team wants a sound check in 10. You're doing amazing, he told me, kissing my temple before heading off. I watched him go, that steady confidence in his stride. People often mistook him for quiet or simple because he didn't brag, but he was a powerhouse, built his business from the ground up, treated people right, and never let money change who he was. The type of man my family had no idea existed. A coordinator hurried toward me. Ms. Brooks, the drone crew is in position. They'll capture the entire drive-up line. A slow smile spread across my face. Perfect. I made my way down the glass aisle, my dress fluttering behind me, when my phone buzzed violently in my hand. I checked the screen. Madison. Why are people posting pictures of a luxury car line outside some beach venue? Is that you? Haley, answer me. I didn't. I slid my phone into my clutch and kept walking. Because tonight wasn't about proving her wrong, it was about proving myself right. As the rehearsal began, the soft glow of golden lights illuminated the platform. The waves shimmered underneath us, gentle but powerful. Every vendor moved with precision. Every detail was flawless. The photographer approached me mid-walk. "Haley, look left, yes, perfect. You're natural." I wasn't. I just felt free. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't shrinking to fit inside someone's low expectations. Halfway through rehearsal, one of Carter's business partners approached me, an older woman named Rebecca in stylish reading glasses. "Haley, I just wanted to say, Carter's never looked as happy as he is planning this wedding with you. He talks about you like you put the stars in his sky." My throat tightened. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "He chose right," she added. "And you? You're going to walk into that ceremony tomorrow with the entire coastline cheering for you." I laughed lightly. "I hope it's not too much." She shook her head. "Honey, this is what happens when you treat people well. They show up." Behind her, more cars rolled in, their headlights sweeping across the ocean like moving constellations. This was really happening. Later, after rehearsal ended, Carter and I walked down to the shoreline. The moonlight cast silver ripples across the water. My shoes dangled from my fingers. I let the waves lap at my toes. Carter looked at me with that soft seriousness he reserved only for quiet moments. "Tomorrow, we're starting our life together. I don't care who shows up. I only care that you're the one waiting for me at the end of that aisle." "I'll be there," I whispered. "And I'll be the luckiest man alive." We stood there, waves brushing our ankles, luxury cars glowing behind us, my phone buzzing nonstop in my clutch, but I didn't reach for it. Madison could wait. Tomorrow, she'd see everything. And she'd finally understand. I wasn't the quiet sister. I was the underestimated one. And I had just rewritten the ending. The next morning, the group chat was already exploding before I even opened my eyes. Missed calls. 27 messages. 3 voicemails. All from Madison. I didn't bother listening. I just set my phone face down on the counter and let the makeup artist start her work. "You're glowing already," she said as she brushed soft shimmer along my cheekbones. "That's because today's the day," I replied. Outside my suite window, I could hear the engines of arriving cars, smooth, expensive hums layered over the sound of waves. The parking coordinators whistled and directed drivers, and every now and then someone shouted, "Another McLaren," or "2 Bentleys incoming." By noon, the coastline was filled again, hundreds of luxury vehicles sparkling under the sun. And then came the messages from relatives. Not insults, not snide comments, but disbelief. "Aunt Maria. Haley, what is this?" "Uncle Dan. This venue is insane." "Cousin Jenna. Are we supposed to be here?" "Is this real?" Finally, one from Madison. "Madison, why didn't you tell us it was this big?" I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because the woman they used to talk down to didn't owe them explanations anymore. The coordinator stepped inside. "Ms. Brooks, we're ready for your entrance." My heart thudded once, hard. This was it. I stepped into the hallway, my gown flowing behind me like soft cloud layers. Carter waited at the end of the glass aisle with his back turned, hands folded, chest rising steadily. When he finally turned to me, his expression melted into something warm and speechless. His eyes glistened, just for a second. "You look," he exhaled. "Haley, you look unbelievable." Before I could respond, gasps rippled from the seated guests. A low hum rolled through the crowd. Admiration, not judgment. Cameras clicked softly. The ocean breeze lifted my veil. The live stream counter on the large screen beside the platform jumped rapidly. 200,000 viewers. 900,000 viewers. 1.8 million. 2.1 million. 2.4 million. Every guest murmured, stunned. Somewhere in the crowd, I spotted Madison. She was frozen in her seat, lips parted slightly, eyes wide like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. Our gazes locked for half a second. But instead of looking away, I lifted my chin, not out of arrogance, but out of the quiet strength I had earned. She swallowed hard. Her expression flickered. Confusion, envy, maybe something like regret. As I reached Carter, he held out his hand. "You ready?" he whispered. "More than ready." The officiant smiled. "Let's make this moment beautiful." And with those words, the ocean breeze, golden sunlight, and the soft rustle of my gown all felt like pieces of a story finally coming together. Madison's voice, once so sharp, finally faded into the background, replaced by applause, cameras, and the undeniable truth. This was my moment, and everyone was here to see it. The ceremony unfolded like something pulled straight from a dream, soft music drifting over the water, sunlight scattering across the glass aisle, and gentle waves echoing beneath our feet. I barely processed the words being spoken. All I could feel was Carter's steady hand wrapped around mine. When the officiant announced, "You may seal your vase," Carter leaned in, touching his forehead to mine first, just a second of quiet grounding, before kissing me softly. The guests erupted in applause. Camera shutters clicked like rainfall. The live stream counterflashed. 2.5 million viewers watching live. That number alone could have knocked the breath out of me. The girl my family used to tease for being forgettable had just had one of the most watched weddings on the internet that day. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, petals floating in the wind, people cheered. Some I knew, some I didn't. But every face glowed with genuine happiness. Except one. Madison stood near the side railing, hands clasped tightly, her expression unreadable. When her eyes finally met mine, she stepped forward hesitantly. "Haley," her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't know it was going to be like this." I kept my posture straight. "You never asked." She swallowed, glancing at the coastline filled with luxury cars, the massive production, the elegant details. I was wrong. About everything. I shouldn't have said what I said at Lily's dinner. A part of me wanted to keep walking, to let the past stay where it belonged. But another part, the one shaped by Carter's kindness, knew the weight of carrying grudges. "You hurt me," I said simply. "More times than you probably realize." Madison nodded, eyes dropping. "I know, and I'm sorry, honestly." I studied her for a moment. Her voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't sarcastic. It was real. "Thank you," I said finally. "I accept that." Relief loosened her shoulders. She stepped back as Carter squeezed my hand gently and leaned in to whisper, "You handled that perfectly." The reception that followed was alive, string lights swaying above the deck, guests laughing, music playing, the ocean glowing under the moon. Carter spun me around during our first dance, lifting me slightly off the ground as the crowd cheered. "You happy?" he whispered. I smiled up at him, more than I ever imagined. Later, we stepped onto the private overlook above the water. The night air wrapped around us as hundreds of headlights shimmered like stars scattered across the cliffside. "This is all for you," Carter said. "For us," I corrected. "For us," he repeated with a grin. My phone vibrated once more, this time with a single message from Madison. "I'm proud of you. Truly." I slipped the phone away. The message mattered, but it wasn't what defined me. This moment did. This peace did. This love did. As Carter pulled me into his arms, the wind brushing my veil, I realized something. Revenge hadn't been the luxury cars, or the views, or the audience. Revenge was becoming the version of myself they never believed I could be. A version who didn't need anyone's approval, only her own. And with that, my story didn't just end beautifully. It finally began.